I'll give your undivided attention to Dr. Shmuel.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for that nice introduction. I want to just, I am a nutritionist. I've been practicing nutrition for many, many years. And I try to do as much education as I can, either through writing or teaching or lecturing. And it's a pleasure for me to be here tonight and to address this group. And I want to say a special kol hakavod to you for coming out in the rain, right? And by the way, I do see some grapes on that table there, so it's not all bad, all right? Anyway, the source material that I use for tonight's talk is the ethical writings of Maimonides by Dover Publications, and also we're going to quote from Shmona Prakim, the 8 chapters. I just want to express a karas tov both to Chazaq and TorahAnytime.com for all the work they do in spreading Torah to the Jewish people, their Marbitz Torah all over the world. Because anytime an organization like Chazaq or Torah Anytime brings even one Jew closer to Torah, closer to mitzvahs, we're having an impact on all of Klal Yisrael. So it's a big thing that they're doing, and Chazak Baruch for all the work that you do, and for those who support and participate in these events, Chazak Baruch to all of you as well. Okay, what I'd like to do tonight, I'm contributing my share by trying to promote good health in the Jewish community, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. I'd like to ask the audience here a question tonight. How many people sitting in this room would like to be world famous? Okay, I think we'd get more hands up if we turned off the camera. Anyway, okay, all right. How many people here? A few hands went up for that. How many people here would like to be multimillionaires? Multimillionaires. Okay, I got more hands up for that. Multi-billionaires. Okay, but listen, I still didn't get all the hands up. So if I didn't get all the hands up for that last question I just asked you, I'm assuming some of you already achieved that goal. Okay, but now for the last question. This works all the time. I get every hand up for this. How many people want to be healthy? Okay, everybody wants to have good health. Many times in life, it's human nature to take things for granted. Am I right? Many times people don't appreciate their health as much as they should. And I want to just tell you that there is a purpose for having good health. And it may not be the purpose you might think of automatically. Really, the purpose of good health should serve as a means for us to serve Hashem. In other words, we shouldn't want to be healthy just for the pleasure of being healthy. But we know that there's a pasuk that says, B'chol deravecha de'ehu. In all our ways, we should know Hashem. We should serve Hashem and know Hashem. So, meaning, we should use our health to be able to serve Hashem. We should want to have good health in order to be able to serve Hashem. We know there's another pasuk that says, V'shamartem ma'od l'nafshei seichem, that you should guard your souls well. Now, by guarding your body, the body is what? The body is really the house of the soul. So by taking care of the body, you allow the soul to function and do the things it needs to do, because the soul depends on the body to do the mitzvahs, right? So if the body is not in good health, you can't do the mitzvahs. So the health of the body plays an important role with the soul, and they're both interrelated. The soul protects the health of the body protects the health of the soul, and so on. Now I just want to quote to you from something that the Rambam says, that Maimonides says. So just listen to this quote. He says, since preserving the body's health and strength is among the ways of Hashem, for to attain understanding and knowledge is impossible when one is sick, a person needs to keep away from things that destroy the body and to accustom himself to things that make him healthy and vigorous. And he says they are as follows. A person should eat only when he is hungry. How many people can honestly say they do that, right? How many people here would say they eat when they're sometimes upset, happy, angry, bored, frustrated, under stress? How many people would just like to keep your hands up? Okay. So there are many other reasons why we eat, not only when we're hungry, but the Rambam is saying we should eat really just to take care of the physical needs of the body when we're hungry. And the same thing for drinking, So these are some points that he makes that we need to keep in mind. And I'll talk more about this in a few minutes. And we'll take some questions at the end. Is that okay? Okay, fine. So what I want to talk about now is, I believe that if you appreciate something, how many people would agree to this statement? If you appreciate something, you take better care of it. Am I right? Okay. So, for example, most of us use telephones, cell phones, and things like that. Most of us don't know how the phone works. We pick it up, we hit some buttons, and you're talking to someone in Israel in a few seconds. It's unbelievable. We don't really appreciate that technology because we really don't understand what makes it tick. But if an engineer came to you and sat with you for a half hour and told you exactly what's happening every time you press a button, the next time you would pick up that phone, you would have more of what we call hakaras hatov. You would have a much greater appreciation for that phone. Doesn't that make sense? When you understand how something works, you have more appreciation for it, and so on. So I think it's important for us to develop hakaras hatov for the human body. In other words, if we would stop to think a minute of the wonders and the miracles of the human body, we would see the Ribbon Shalom. We would see Hashem. As the pasuk in Eov says, through my body I see the Creator. There is a Rabbi Avigdor Militzal, and he said the following. I heard him say this once, or maybe I read it. He says, in the wintertime, if you go into a store, it's cold outside, you go into a store and it's hot, and you're wearing glasses. What happens to the glasses? They get fogged up, right? As soon as you hit that store, it's warm in the store. Maybe you go into a bakery or a pizza place, someplace where it's hot. You go in, it's cold, you're wearing glasses, they fog up, you can't see. But Rabbi Avigdor Miller says, when you go into that store, let's say you're not wearing glasses, your eyes don't fog up. Isn't that amazing? The eyes are so miraculous. They can see in color, they can see black and white, they can see motion. They don't fog up like the glasses do. Hashem puts special things into the eyes to prevent them from fogging up when they go from cold to a hot environment. All we have to do is stop and think about the body and think about the miracles of the body, and we would have a much greater hakaras hatov for the body, much greater appreciation for the body. And you know what? That would lead us to take better care of it. So this is really what I want to focus on tonight, what we can do to take better care of ourselves and the importance of doing that. I'll tell you a little Musar exercise that you can do. I heard this somewhere. I thought it was very powerful, so I want to share it with you. You go to a specialist. Let's say you go to a heart specialist, a heart doctor, and you ask that heart doctor, how many diseases could affect the heart and the blood vessels? Let's say he tells you, today we know there are 200 different kinds of diseases that affect the heart and the blood vessel. And then you go to an ear doctor. How many diseases could affect the ear? And he tells you 100. And then you go to a liver doctor, and he tells you a couple of hundred diseases affect the liver. Before you know it, after going to all these specialists, you find out that at any given moment in time, thousands and thousands of ailments and conditions and illnesses can affect any part of the body. And then you know what you have to do after that? You have to thank Hashem for each one of those that you don't have. That's how much appreciation we have to have for a healthy body and to appreciate our health. And by doing that, by thinking along these ways, hopefully we have a greater desire to take care of this miraculous body that Hashem gave us. So these are some of the points I want us to be aware of as we go further. Okay, I want to tell you a little story. I read this a while ago. It was a story about tourists that would go up on this mountain cliff, and it had a beautiful panoramic view. And what would happen is they were so enthralled by the view that they would get a little too close to the edge, and they would fall off. And on the bottom of the cliff, there was a whole line of ambulances. When somebody fell off, an ambulance would come, pick the person up, take them to the hospital, and all day long this would happen. People would get a little too close. They got so... they were just so involved with the view, they didn't pay attention, they fell off, an ambulance came, picked them up, and this went on for a long, long time. Finally, somebody had an idea. They went up on top of the mountain, and they put a fence around it. And they didn't need the ambulances anymore, and people stopped falling off. So I want to tell you something very interesting. There's a pasuk in Sefer Devarim that says, Ki tivne bayit chadash v'asisa ma'akeh legagecha, which means when you build, if you build a new house, the Torah tells us you have to put a rail around the roof. So you shouldn't be responsible for bloodshed if somebody would fall off. So we could see from this pasuk that there's a concept of prevention in the Torah. The concept of trying to prevent problems. And this is a very, very important point. And this is really what the Rambam talks about. You know, the idea of preventing illness. And the question is, can we really do that? So we're going to see in a minute if that's so. I want to tell you right now, as we sit here, we are in the midst of an ongoing health crisis. I heard Rabbi Noach Isaac Olbaum once say that he doesn't remember the Misha Berach lines being so long. When he was growing up, he didn't remember them being so long. And now, we all know the Misha Berach lines are very, very long. They're getting longer all the time. We know that in the state of New York, diabetes is an epidemic. An epidemic. There could be people walking around with it, they're not even aware of it. We know that heart disease in the United States kills approximately 1 million people a year. We know that cancer is the second highest killing disease in the United States. And we know that smoking kills 400,000 people in the United States every year. It's almost 500,000 people every year due to smoking-related diseases. And the latest study says the following, that obesity and poor eating habits will soon overtake the smoking statistics. So the 400,000 deaths due to smoking are going to be surpassed by poor eating habits and obesity. So we are really mamish in the middle of a health crisis, an ongoing health crisis that's been going on for a long time. And the question is, do we just sit back and do nothing? Do we have to feel helpless? Are there things that we can do that could make a difference? So this is what I want to get into very shortly. And I want to try to cover some of the highlights that the Rambam talks about. That's the title of the talk, The Rambam, Nutrition and You. And I want to give you some very interesting insights. The Rambam had Das Torah. All his knowledge and wisdom came from the Torah. So because when a person has Das Torah, they have the truth. And when a person delves, when a great gadol like the Rambam delves into the Torah, he can learn out everything from the Torah. And 800 years ago, the Rambam said things that are being proven today. The scientific community are proving what he said 800 years ago. And we're going to see some of those things in a minute. Even in our own generation, there have been gedolim and great rabbis who were able to tell surgeons how to perform surgery. Yeah, Chazaq Ish, Reb Moshe Feinstein Sal. There were many, many great gedolim in our generation that were able to tell chief surgeons how to go in and do very difficult operations. These rabbis never went to medical school. How did they know? This is what Das Torah is. When a great person, delves with all his kaiches into the Torah, he has a wisdom and a knowledge and a truth. And there's a pasuk in Pirkei Avot that says everything is in the Torah. So we could see great people have this, and we're going to talk about the Rambam's Das Torah, and so on. Okay. There's a pasuk in Tehillim from David HaMelech, guard your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Guard your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. So why does it say tongue and lips? It seems like it's a little redundant. Maybe just say one. So guard your tongue means not to put bad food in your mouth, and your lips from speaking deceit, not to speak lashon hara. So this is sort of a formula for good health, to not put bad foods into the mouth and to not speak lashon hara. Okay, let's go into some of the things I want to share with you from the Rambam. And it's very interesting. We know that in today's world, the eating habits have gotten very bad, as we heard a little while ago, right? I could tell you that in the 1600s, when the Pilgrims first came to this country, the average person was consuming 7 pounds of sugar a year. 7 pounds. The average person today, 300 some odd years later, is consuming somewhere between 135 and 150 pounds of sugar a year. The average person. We know there are a lot of problems with the eating habits today. The Rambam's message to us is you should avoid extremes. This is what he talks about in Midot. He says, go to the middle, avoid extreme personality traits. And when it comes to doing things, I'm sure he would advise us to not have extreme, unhealthy eating habits and so on. So there are many, many problems with what we call SAD, SAD, the Standard American Diet. And I want to just touch on some of the points the Rambam's going to make, and hopefully it will inspire us to maybe make some changes. I will tell you that it would be the wrong hashkafa, the wrong attitude to say, whatever's meant to be will be. Doesn't matter what I do, doesn't matter what I eat, doesn't matter how much sleep I get, doesn't matter if I smoke, doesn't matter about my weight. If it's meant for me to get sick, I'm going to get sick. If it's meant for me not to get sick, I'm not going to get sick. Now we know we have an achrayus, we have a responsibility. The Torah hashkafa is, we have to make every effort to take care of ourselves and do the right thing. The ultimate outcome is not in our hands, and even the efforts we make, we can't attribute our success to any efforts we make in life. We can only attribute a success to Hashem. But nevertheless, we're still responsible. We have to make the efforts. So we know if a person gets into a car and drives like a maniac and doesn't stop at stop signs or red lights or wear a seatbelt, there's a good chance that person's going to get hurt or killed or certainly be in an accident. Where if a person is a cautious driver and stops and follows the speed limit and does all the right things, that person could also be in an accident. But did the risk go down? What would you say? Yeah. The risk went down a lot. So I think this might be a good way to approach health as well. Take sensible, necessary steps to try to preserve your health. And I'm going to share with you a few things right now. So these are some things that the Rambam says, and maybe we can discuss them a little bit, and then we'll take some of your questions. He says the following. He says, eat foods suitable to making the body healthy, and not what appeals to the eyes and the sensory organs. In other words, don't go after the eyes. You see food that might look attractive, that might look appealing in some way, but if it's not really going to promote health, the Rambam is telling us to avoid those kinds of foods. The next thing he says is not to be a glutton when it comes to eating, not to gorge ourselves, not to overeat. As a matter of fact, he makes a very, very powerful point. He says the following: most illnesses are due to bad foods and to stuffing the stomach. Overeating and unhealthy foods are the source of almost all illnesses. This is what the Rambam says. He says that to overeat, to stuff the stomach, it's like a deadly poison to the body. He goes as far to say, better a little bit of a bad food than too much of a good food. This is how strong his point is on the problems with overeating. I don't know if anybody knows. Do you know that walking is the second best exercise in the world? So what's the question you're supposed to ask me? What's the first? Right. Does anybody know the first? Swimming, jogging, these are good guesses. Running, also great guesses. Riding a bike, no. Weight training, no.
Starving.
What's that? No, not starving. Okay, the best, no one's going to get it. I was going to offer a trip to Hawaii, but I better give you the answer, okay? The best exercise in the world is pushing yourself away from the table. That's the best exercise in the world. So the Rambam says, he doesn't specifically say to push away from the table, but the Rambam says you should eat until you are 3/4 full. In other words, develop a sensitivity and awareness that you're not really, like 3/4 full, there's still room to eat, and that's the time to leave the table. In other words, to develop a discipline or to train yourself to stop before you're full. And he says these are the things that will promote health, because he's telling us that overeating is one of the main causes of all disease. And I want to tell you something. I'll tell you what the latest research is on overeating. They're doing studies now. They did animal studies. They took 2 groups of rats. One group they overfed, and they kept them sedentary. The other group they underfed. They didn't starve them. They just gave them less calories, good nutrition, less calories, and they exercised them. The group that was exercised and underfed lived almost twice as long as the group that was sedentary and stuffed, overfed. Now they're doing, what's that?
I'm sorry, it says sedentary?
Sedentary, like no exercise. Yeah. Now they're doing human studies now like this, and they're already finding benefits in humans as well. That health problems like blood pressure and cholesterol levels and blood sugar levels seem to improve when the caloric intake is not as high. You see what I'm saying? So we can see health benefits, and we can see, just think about this. Think of the following example. If you have a machine and you overuse that machine, what happens to the parts? You keep using it over and over again. The parts start to get hot. They start to wear out. It's more prone to that machine and those parts breaking sooner. Am I right? So the human body is not so different. I'm not saying it's a machine, but when you consume more calories than you need, all the organs in the body have to work harder to process those calories. The intestines, the stomach, the liver, the kidneys, even the heart. Which means that you're putting more wear and tear on those organs in the body. How many people after a big heavy meal don't feel that good? You feel tired, sluggish, like you can't even move. So you can see too much, there are simanim, there are signs that the body will give you when you're not doing the right things. Many people who eat healthier and lighter, they'll tell me, when they come to see me, they'll say, I feel better. I have more energy. I'm more alert. I'm not getting sick as much. I can concentrate better. And so on and so forth. So we can see there really are benefits. There was a Rosh Yeshiva who said to me one time, he says, many of the Talmidim are not learning well as they could because they're not eating well. He saw a direct connection between their eating habits and their ability to learn. And we know even when kids go to school, it's the same thing. If they don't have breakfast, they don't perform as well in school as kids who go with a breakfast. So what we're eating, when we're eating, how we're eating, all make a big difference. Okay, let me give you a few more points, and then we'll take some questions and comments that you might have. The Rambam says that flour, like we make bread out of, should not be sifted to such an extent that none of the bran remains. In other words, don't take the bran completely out. I can tell you that at one point we used to eat breads that weren't processed and refined. About 150 years ago, when they had the, all the technology and so on, we started to refine grains. And when you refine a grain, you take out all the good parts, and all you're left with is the white flour. And the Rambam is saying when you take the bran out, it's going to affect the body in bad ways. In other words, we know today that when bread doesn't have the bran in it, the fiber in it, when you eat that bread, it will turn to sugar much quicker, and the sugar will affect your blood sugar much faster. It will go into your blood much faster. We also know that when grains are refined, we miss a lot of the vitamins and minerals in there. So this is another important point to keep in mind. What does he say about sleep? He says that we should try to get 8 hours of sleep a night. And they did a big study with about 20,000 women, and they found that women who get under 6 hours a night have a greater risk for heart disease, diabetes, and obesity than women who get like 7 or 8 hours a night. So sleep plays an important role, and the Rambam gave us the magic number. 8 seems to be the number that we could see the studies even say are important for us. He also talks about exercise. he says that even if you do a lot of good, healthy things, if you don't exercise, he says you'll have a lot of pain and your strength will diminish. So some physical activity and exercise is very important. We know that Chazal, they did physical things to keep themselves in shape. There are things that they did. They saw the value of physical activity. Now that doesn't mean we have to overdo it or spend too much time doing it, but some moderate, regular physical activity and exercise is essential to good health as well. So what I want to do is I'm just going to quickly give you some guidelines for what a healthy diet would look like. And basically, a healthy diet is one that's colorful, like a rainbow. You should have a lot of colorful fruits and vegetables. You should try to cut out as much sugar as possible. We eat a lot of the wrong fats, animal fats, too much saturated fat from like red meat, butter, cream, full-fat dairy products. So this is a big problem today. We also should use more fish in the diet. Many people eat a lot of meat and chicken, but fish is an important source of the omega-3 oil. So I'm just trying to give you a little summary, a little outline of things that you should consider. We should try to eat less animal protein. You know the way the Chinese eat protein? If you ever go to a Chinese restaurant, you order a Chinese meal, you get a lot of vegetables, you get little small pieces of chicken mixed in with the vegetables, and some rice. If you take all the chicken out, you only have a few ounces, maybe 2 or 3 ounces. You have mostly vegetables. So that's a better way to eat. Fill up the plate with more vegetables, have less animal protein, try to get the sugar out, and try to use more whole grain products like brown rice, whole wheat breads, oatmeal, things like that. Try to get enough water in your diet, and try not to eat. Make sure you don't overeat. So if you follow some of these guidelines, this is just a little bit, hopefully we could see better health and more energy, and we could reduce the risk of many of the health problems that we see today. Okay, I'm not trying to I can't give personal medical advice. I'm just giving you some guidelines. You should talk to your healthcare professionals before you make any changes. You should get your regular checkups and things like that. And I'll give you one little tip. The next time you see your doctor, you may even want to make an appointment to do this, get your vitamin D level checked. Vitamin D is in David. 80% of the people sitting in this room may have low levels in vitamin D. And if your levels are too low, the risk for many illnesses becomes much higher. Cancer, heart disease, diabetes, joint and bone problems, gum disease, even your immune system is affected if you don't have enough vitamin D. Where do we get vitamin D from? Anybody know? From the sun. The problem is when you live up north like we do, for about 5 months out of the year, there's very, very little sun exposure, right? Because either the weather is bad or it's so cold that we're covered up with clothing and we don't really get much sun exposure. So we tend to have low levels of vitamin D, and there are increased health risks. So I'm going to encourage you to get your vitamin D level checked. In my practice, I see low vitamin D levels all the time, and I see people who don't get enough of the omega-3 oil that's primarily found in fish. If you can't eat fish, there are other places to get omega-3, but these are just a few things. The body needs 40 different nutrients every day. Now let's say you're getting 39 out of 40. How many people would say you're doing good? Raise your hands. 39 out of 40? Okay, I would think so also. The problem is, let's say the only one you're missing is something like vitamin D. Let's say you're missing iron. You're getting all the others, but you're missing iron. You're low in iron. What's going to happen? You're going to develop iron deficiency anemia, and you'll be very sick and very weak. So you can see when it comes to nutrition, even 39 out of 40 is not good enough. You really got to get everything. So eating as well as you could, considering a multivitamin mineral supplement just to fill in case you're missing certain things, getting your vitamin D levels checked. These are things that you could do to shore up nutritional deficiencies. But they're very serious because every vitamin or mineral or nutrient that your body needs that you don't get, if you go a long enough period of time without it, each one will lead to a different disease. If you don't get enough calcium, it's going to affect your bones. You get osteoporosis. If you don't have enough vitamin A, you won't be able to see well at night. Every organ in the body will be affected by some deficiency. And in today's world, we have a good amount of deficiencies, vitamin D being a very prominent one, but there are many others that we could be suffering from as well. Okay, So what I'd like to do is I'll take some comments or questions that you may have. Also, what I'm willing to do is if you want to email me, I will send you 18. I have something I've worked on for a number of years called L'chaim, 18 health tips to live by. So we'll send that to you if you're interested. So who would like to ask a question? Okay, I'll repeat the question. Go ahead.
Normal levels for vitamin D. Like what's the number?
On a blood test, like on the range? Okay, it's a good question. She wants to know, like on a lab report, what are the ranges? So different labs may have different ranges. Some of the ones I've seen go from about 30 or 32 to 100. A number of my patients are coming in with, after they get a check, they're showing me levels sometimes like 15 or 20 or 25, so they're way under where the minimum level should be. So the minimum level is like 32, depending on the kind of lab that does the test and the type of test they do. But 32 to 100 is the, and I can tell you, they did a very interesting study down south. They checked the blood levels of Southerners. Now, Southerners get more what? More sun than we do, more months out of the year. And they found that their vitamin D blood levels were higher, and they had much lower levels of many different cancers. And the researchers attributed it to having normal or higher vitamin D levels. So it's a very important thing. Again, you don't want to go overboard. You should have a test, see where your level is, take steps to correct it if it needs to be, and then find out what you need to do to maintain it in a normal range. Okay, let me take this.
About the fasting, I just need to know like what Rambam's saying about the fasting. It's healthy or no?
About fasting? Her question is, what does the Rambam say about fasting? I don't know if I came across, I'm not saying he doesn't say anything about fasting. I don't know if I saw anything in my research about what he says about fasting. The thing that seems to be most important to the Rambam on a day-in, day-out basis is to not overconsume, not to have less calories, not to overeat. He says that's the most important thing. It's also the more dangerous thing. The most dangerous thing is to consume too many calories. But I'm not sure exactly if he addresses fasting. He may, but I haven't really seen something on his point on fasting. Gentleman in the back?
Yeah, what's your stand on like alcoholic beverages?
Okay, so alcohol...
Say a glass of wine is healthier.
Right. It's a good question. It seems like moderate alcohol consumption does have some health benefits. However, it's always good to address alcohol consumption with your healthcare practitioner. When they say moderate, it usually means like no more than 1 alcoholic beverage a day for a woman and no more than 2 for a man. Now this is why you need to speak to a healthcare professional, because some people could already have an illness where alcohol could be a problem for them, or you may also be taking medicines and things that could interfere if you're using alcohol. The other thing is, even though there seem to be cardiovascular benefits with alcohol consumption, it has some benefits to the blood vessels, to the cardiovascular system, it does slightly increase the risk of cancer. So it's sort of like a very fine balance. I would say in moderation, for most people, it's probably not going to be a problem. And your doctors would probably tell you something similar, but I would run it by them.
How does it increase the risk of cancer?
I don't know the exact mechanism, but it seems to have a small increase, in that area. Okay, let me take.
What would you say is the most important thing to integrate in health? Because there's so much things. There's sleep, food, this, that. What would you say is the most important to integrate right now?
Okay, it's a very good question he's asking. He wants to know if I had to pick one of the most important things, what would I suggest? So I would suggest that I would have each person look at their own lifestyle, and I would say, if you feel you're eating pretty well, and you're getting moderate amount of exercise, and basically you have some good habits, but you see you're only getting 3 hours of sleep a night, I would say for you, that would be the most important thing to do. If you're getting 7 or 8 hours of sleep a night, and you're doing good in those areas, but your diet is horrendous, I don't mean you personally, but I would work on that. In other words, look at your weak, it's like a chain. You look at the weakest link, because that's where you're going to have the problem. So you look at the weakest link. You could be doing a lot of things right, but if you're not getting enough sleep, it's not going to work. The more things you're missing, or the more places that you are out of balance in, the more consequences and risks that a person would be taking. This lady here?
When you mention sleep, what is exactly like the scientific background behind it? Like, is it that when you're overtired, you tend to eat more, or that your body's processing the food differently?
You mean with sleep, you're saying?
Yeah, or lack of sleep.
A lack of sleep. Okay, so the basic thing with sleep is that most people have what we call a sleep deficit. They don't get enough sleep. Now, at one point, we underestimated the value of sleep. It turns out that sleep, when your body is sleeping, first of all, your immune system is repairing itself. The body's repairing itself. It's a time when the cells repair. It's a time when the immune system is strengthened. The heart is resting. You know, there are many, many, many numerous benefits that sleep supplies that we either took for granted or weren't aware of. But now, with the latest research, they are recognizing all of these benefits and so on. We all know that if you don't sleep well, even one night, you're not the same person the next day. Mentally, you're not functioning as well. Physically, you don't feel as well. Emotionally, you don't feel as well. You're more moody, more agitated. You can't concentrate. That's only after one night of not sleeping well. So you can see the effects of not sleeping are very serious. If for some reason you don't sleep well on a regular basis, everybody once in a while may not sleep well one night or two. But if you regularly don't sleep well, you should really get a physical exam from your doctor and see if there's any medical reason or any physical cause. And if not, then maybe you'd have to consult with like a specialist. They have sleep specialists that try to determine why people aren't sleeping well. Okay, so yeah.
Okay, actually I have two questions. One is if you could address raw food versus cooked food, like macrobiotics has this thing, more salt, more thyme, more pressure in the winter, and go light, and things like that. And then if you read the raw foods camp, they're saying that the cooked foods, they have no energy.
Right,
That's
right,
the first
right.
question. And the
Right.
second one is if you could give us some good tips for Shabbat, because I know I'm not the only one who feels horrible on Shabbat because the food combining, and then you have the cholent and you have the fish and the meat and this white collar, and then you feel awful and you just want to go to sleep.
Okay, so that's a lot in one. Okay, so let's just quickly touch on the first. Again, if I had more time, we could do more justice on some of these answers. But let's just the question was raw foods versus cooked foods. Now you probably know, if you do any kind of reading, there's a lot of literature out there and a lot of theories about what's the best way to eat cooked food, raw foods. There's all sorts of schools of thought. So I would say the Jewish way is not to be extreme, okay? To try to be sensible. So for someone to say that you should only eat raw foods and never eat cooked foods, or, would be probably, I think we would all agree that wouldn't make much sense. I would say a combination of cooked and raw foods is fine. I would say if you want to try to get something raw at every meal, in other words, that might be a good guideline. So try to have a small salad or some vegetable, something that's not cooked. This way you can get the best of both worlds. There are certain nutrients that could be lost in cooking, but certain foods, when they're cooked, give you better nutrition. For example, when you eat a cooked carrot, you get more of the beta-carotene than when you eat it raw. So it's, I would go with a combination of, the main thing is whole foods as opposed to processed foods, and trying to use a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables. I'll tell you, frozen vegetables come out even better than fresh sometimes because they're frozen right away. When you take a head of spinach out of the ground, one day later it loses 50% of its vitamin C. So the head of spinach that's pulled out of the ground somewhere in the Midwest and goes into a truck, into a warehouse, makes it to the supermarket, stays there for a few days. You buy it, it's in your refrigerator for a few days. By the time you eat that spinach, it's 2 weeks old. It's losing constantly over time. I'm not saying there's nothing left, but frozen is frozen right away. It might preserve better and so on. As far as Shabbos meals, I would... look, I'm not saying you don't want to starve on Shabbos, right? Okay. You want to eat better foods, foods that you enjoy, but there's no mitzvah to gorge yourself on Shabbos. In other words, you still should try not to overeat so you feel too heavy and sick and so on. And you can make lighter meals also. You can make more salads or more cooked vegetables. Maybe you can use less starch. Try to use more vegetables than starch. You know, instead of putting potatoes maybe in the cholent, use vegetables or things like that. So there are things you could do to make your meals healthier and lighter. Try to avoid maybe things that are prepared with a lot of grease and oil and so on. You can get whole wheat challahs. You can get, you know, there are things you could maneuver. It's not. It's
a lot of food combining.
Yeah, I know. I would say the food combining is less important than the amounts that you're consuming. That's probably, I know food combining could factor in a little bit, but I think the amounts could be, and the types could be maybe more of a problem. Yeah.
I have a question. One, going back to the vitamin D level. If someone has low vitamin D level, right, like you said, like 14, 15, and then they go away for vacation somewhere, you know, in California or whatever, and they're under the sun for that 1 week,
Right.
does that bring them up to normal?
It's a good question.
Or does it take like a longer period of time?
There's no way of really knowing for sure unless you have your blood tested again. Usually with supplements, you know, trying to get it up with supplements, depending on the dosage, it can go up pretty fast. Some doctors will, if they find that you're very low, they may give you a dose of 50,000 international units, which is a very, very high dose. You may only take it once a week for 3 or 4 times, and then your level will be high. And, you know, it should be in a better range. And then they'll bring you down to a much lower dose. The sun, there's mixed theories on how much sun exposure, how long, and what parts of the body have to be exposed to really get the maximum benefits. So it's not really so clear, but a little bit of sun will help. How long it will take will depend on how much sun exposure, how much of the body gets the sun, and, you know, but you'd really have to have your blood checked to really know.
And then the second question was, if you have all this food, whether it's Shabbat or any other day, what would be the proper way of eating? Like, what would be the first thing you should eat, and the second and the third, in order to digest all this food normally?
You mean on a typical day kind of thing? Okay. I mean types of foods or just...
Well, in terms of like salads and bread and meat and everything that you have on the table, like what would be the order of the...
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. So I'll just tell you very, very briefly. She wants to know, like, should there be an order to eating? The Rambam says something very interesting. First of all, he does say that the foods should change with the seasons. In other words, in the colder weather, the colder climates, the rainy season he refers to, he says the food should be a little bit heavier, and maybe we should use some more spices. He says in the hotter seasons, the food should be lighter. And if you think about it, that's the way people eat. People in the tropics are not eating very heavy meals like meats and things like that. They're eating a lot of fruits and vegetables. The Eskimo, on the other hand, is eating a lot of whale blubber. You know, they're eating a lot of heavy, oily fish and so on. So seasons make a difference. And the Rambam actually says that the lighter food should be eaten before the heavier food. Now, there are people that will tell you, testimonials, that when they combine foods differently or eat in a different order, sometimes they feel a difference. Everybody's different. Everybody's digestive system is different. Some people have like cast iron digestive systems. They could eat this podium here and be fine. You know what I mean? And some people, if they just look at a food, they could become sick. You know, so I would say you could experiment and you could see what seems to work for you. In other words, if you find that if you drink a glass of orange juice after you ate the hard-boiled egg and you don't feel so well, because the egg takes 3 to 5 hours to digest in the stomach. The orange juice passes through your stomach very quickly. So if you eat the egg first, the egg is going to sit there for 3 to 5 hours. If you eat a piece of fruit or drink some juice now, it's going to be tied up in there with the egg for a number of hours. It may start to ferment. It may cause gas and other problems. So I believe there is something to food combining. But I think it's very individual. You have to try to see what works for you. I would keep a food diary. I would keep track of your symptoms. I would keep track of how you're eating, what you're eating, and you'll know better than anybody what seems to work best for you. So it has to be tailored a little bit. Yeah.
I just want to know your opinion. Let's say for someone very active, it's hard to have like a perfect 6-meal day. So what do you think about supplements, like multivitamins or protein?
Okay, so I would say supplements will never be able to replace really good eating and good healthy meals. They play a role, but you don't want to overdo supplements, and you really want to try to rely on your foods more. A lot of nutritionists today are recommending sometimes 4 or 5 or 6 even small meals or snacks spread throughout the day instead of 2 or 3 very big heavy meals. So you could see a small snack might be a piece of fruit and some nuts, or you could try small snacks and small meals. Supplements play a role, but you have to do it sensibly. In other words, you can't rely on supplements to replace good eating. What you should do is try to eat as well as you could, and then consider maybe some supplements that can help fill in, whether it's vitamin D or a multivitamin or things like that. I could tell you just one little story I could share with you from my practice. When I have a new patient, I tell them always to bring in all the supplements they're taking. So one day I had a man that came in with a suitcase, and we opened it up, and there were like 40 or 50 bottles in there. And I said to him, you got to be kidding. You take these things every day? And he says, yeah. I said, how long does it take you to swallow all those pills? He says he takes about 20 minutes every day just swallowing his supplements. And then he told me something very interesting. First of all, I looked at everything, and then he told me, he said, I started to get nosebleeds. And he said, one day I had a bad nosebleed. I couldn't stop the bleeding. I went to the hospital. He said they couldn't stop it in the hospital either. What they had to do is they put a balloon in his nose and blew it up to prevent the bleeding. I said to him, you're taking something called ginkgo biloba. You're taking a green tea capsule. You're taking a garlic capsule. You're taking fish oil. Your doctor has you on an aspirin. And I said, you know what these 6 things all have in common? They thin the blood. He was taking too many blood thinners without even knowing it. Now, these things are all healthy and they're all good, but you can overdo things. When it comes to nutrition, too much is not good and too little is not good. It's always a balance. So you got to be careful, and this is why, someone who's knowledgeable about nutrition, or a healthcare professional or a nutritionist, should guide you in terms of what would make sense for your lifestyle, for your habits, for your health conditions, and so on. Wait, in back. Okay, so picky eaters are a problem. Usually role modeling is always a good thing, is to try to have better foods in the house and, make sure everybody is eating those better foods, sometimes preparing them differently, cutting them up, maybe getting the child involved in choosing or selecting things they want to try or would be willing to try. Sometimes if a child likes tomato sauce but doesn't like broccoli, you can put the tomato sauce on the broccoli. They may eat it that way. So sometimes making vegetables into a soup so they don't see the vegetables, but they'll eat the soup. You know what I mean? There's different things. You got to be consistent, and you got to go slowly and take small steps and encourage and try to educate. It's a tough process for some people. Maybe 1 or 2 more questions? Okay.
According to Rambam, I just wanted to check, how many times we're supposed to eat a day, and about the bread, another question, how many times we're supposed to eat the bread a day, like 1, 2 times with each? Okay, I don't think he gives a specific amount in terms of bread, how often or how much bread we should eat every day. I don't believe I've seen that. And in terms of how much or amounts, I think he may say like 2 or 3 meals, maybe like 2 meals a day. Yeah, but I believe I've seen that. But I would say you have to do what works for you. A few small meals or snacks are probably, for most people today, would probably work a little bit better. But the Rambam doesn't want, heavy meals. They're smaller, meals, smaller amounts of calories and so on. Okay, let's take maybe 1 more question. Yeah.
Which foods should you eat to prevent from getting acne?
Good question. His question is foods that might prevent skin problems like acne. It's interesting whether there really is a formula that could be helpful in that area with foods. I would say healthy skin does require healthy nutrition. Acne could be caused by hormonal changes in the body and different things, but there could be some foods that people could be sensitive to that could cause skin problems. I would say being careful with things like greasy foods and fried foods and sugar and sweets, trying to get these things out and trying to have more healthy fruits and vegetables, and maybe eating more fish. The omega-3 oils are important for good skin health. So those are a few things that you may want to keep in mind. Okay, yeah.
Do seeds give you acne?
What's that?
Eating seeds give you acne?
Not that I know of. I don't think so.
Somebody told me once, like, you're not supposed to eat seeds. It gives
You mean like seeds like pumpkin seeds or sunflower seeds,
Yeah,
things like that? I don't know that to be true. I would say as long as the seeds aren't fried with a lot of oil and things like that, you know, they're healthy. Those kind of things are healthy. But if you notice a problem with a certain food, or if anybody knows a certain problem, then you may want to not use a food like that. Okay, I think we'll hold it here. I want to thank everybody for your questions. I enjoyed being here. I hope this was helpful. If you want to, I could give a card. If you want to send me an email, if you have other questions, or if you want that that complimentary 18 health tips to live by, I'll be happy to send that to you. Okay? If you just email me, I'll give you an email address.
Can you say the email address out loud?
I could. You want me to do it that way? Okay. So the email address would be, it's R.M. Shields, SHIELDS, 62, the number 62, at Verizon.net. Again, R.M. Shields, SHIELDS, 62, at Verizon.net. Okay? Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, good luck to everybody. Okay.